How do I think the story would change if Peter Pan was a girl? Welcome back once again to Peter Pan Lore and Peter Pan Facts with me, your Peter Pan hobbyist and enthusiast, using my Peter Pan hobbyist enthusiast brain and knowledge to bring you fun facts, lore and trivia, talk about the world of the Neverland, the story of Peter Pan, and answer you guys' questions. Now, this one is an interesting one, and I have two answers. My answer is both, it would change a lot, and it would change nothing. And I will explain both to you. In terms of it making no difference whatsoever, there's definitely a huge argument to be made for this, mostly because Peter is no longer human, and so the very concept of what you are doesn't apply to him anymore. He's a betwixt and between, not quite bird, not quite human. He has no need of those kind of labels, and it really doesn't matter. So what is important to Peter is that he is young and carefree and not an adult. He says, I always want to be a little boy and to have fun, but he doesn't mean little boy as opposed to little girl. He means little boy as opposed to grown adult man. It is the being young that matters to him, not what gender you are. Also, Peter's opinion on girls has always been very, very good. He behaves impeccably towards Wendy most of the time. He's very respectful of her, and he actually kicks John out of bed when Wendy tells him that John is disrespectful of her. So, yeah, in terms of how he feels about being male or female, yeah, I don't think that it would necessarily change anything about the character. The story could still happen exactly the same way. Captain Hook would still hate him for exactly the same reasons, because he doesn't hate Peter because he's a boy. He hates Peter because he's a cocky little shit. So, yeah, most of it could probably play out pretty much the same way. Except John Darling would feel even more irritated about following Peter if Peter was a girl. Yeah, in terms of that argument, you could definitely argue it changes nothing at all. However, you could also make the very valid argument that changing Peter into a girl would change a lot about the story. A small part of this is that it just feels ickier to have a character like Captain Hook, a grown-ass man, be chasing around a young girl. You can't get around that, it just feels worse. It could also edit the dynamics with Tinkerbell a little bit, because Tinkerbell being jealous of Wendy because she was the other girl in Peter's life, if Peter himself was a girl, I suppose you could get around this by switching Tinkerbell into a boy, or making Tinkerbell just like Peter anyway, so you can get around that, but it's still a thing you'd have to bear in mind to edit. Also, in terms of there being no lost girls on the Neverland, while I have talked already about the fact that Peter would be the last person to know this, you would have to edit that conversation somewhat, because Peter, as a girl himself, couldn't have the belief that there were no other girls, or maybe she could. Maybe that's a misconception she had, and she thought she was the only one, which made her special, that kind of thing. Or maybe you flipped it completely and it's all lost girls with no lost boys. That gets more and more and more complicated. So while you can still do the story, you do have to consider what changes and what implications are there. Overall, for me, what I say is that the concept of gender doesn't apply to a character like Peter Pan anyway, so yes and no, I guess. Any other thoughts, theories, or questions? Chuck them in the comments down below.